Good evening, everyone, and thanks for joining us at this Connect Panel Discussion, which is in association with the New Zealand Herald Business section. My name is Dann. I'm the Business Editor at Large with the New Zealand Herald, and tonight we're discussing why collaborating is the new competing and how collaborative ecosystems could be a new model for doing business. I'd like to thank our speakers, Michelle Sharp from Vodafone, Tony Burt from East Imperial, and Karna Luke from BNZ for joining us, and I'll shortly let them just do a brief introduction themselves. Tell us a little bit about why you think you're here, I guess.
Good question.
My name is Karna Luke and I'm the General Manager of SME for BNZ. A little bit about why I'm here. I also, in another part of my life, have grown companies from small business to business and all the way through. So I'm passionate about the SME economy in New Zealand, and having an opportunity to work and run that SME focus for the BNZ is a real privilege and an honour. So thank you very much for having me here tonight.
Great.
Thanks, Karna. Hi everyone, my name's Tony. I'm the founder and CEO of East Imperial. We're a premium beverage brand, which is located here in Auckland. I guess what I'm here is about 5 or 6 years ago, we set the business up from scratch, and we've scaled very, very quickly and now over 30 countries globally. And we've done that with a really skeleton staff as well. And so the way we've gone about it is probably a little bit unique.
Thanks, Tony. Kia ora, everyone. My name's Michelle Sharp. As per the introduction, I sit here today with my day job being Vodafone. The reason I'm probably here today is similar to these two. So back in the UK, I had my own startup, which grew very, very fast in telecommunications and IT. Again, like a startup, you do it with a skeleton staff, and we used a lot of collaboration. And since being in New Zealand for the last 10 years, I've been CEO of a company called Karna Luke Enterprises, which is a social enterprise. Anyone who's worked in the not-for-profit sector, you'll understand that you do things without money, and you're very resourceful, and without doubt collaboration was the key to our success.
Great, thanks guys. Well, look, I want to kick it off with a sort of a broad definition, so I'm going to start with you, Karna. We're talking about a business ecosystem. What do we mean by that?
Yeah, well, Liam, what we mean by a business ecosystem is essentially bringing together an individual, a business and a community. And effectively, with that ecosystem together, you can do two things. You can produce something of value, and then someone as an individual can consume something of value. And I guess in its earliest form, in New Zealand's context, you might think trade me. Mm-hmm. But the ecosystems actually evolve, and they've evolved quite a bit. Cloud-based accounting applications, for example. You've got inventory management systems, and you've got business to business starting to collaborate and share business to get to a consumer product or service that's valuable to them.
Yeah, I just wonder, Tony, because you guys with East Imperial focused on a global outlook right from the start. You treated this as a drinks company, but you treated it like a startup. I just wonder how you used that collaborative approach to sort of take on the world like that.
Yeah, when we set out to be a global brand. We didn't set out to just sort of, be a mixer brand or a software brand in New Zealand. We had bigger ambitions. I think there's probably a certain naivety about that. So we set our goals quite lofty and big, and then we sort of set about how can we achieve them. So we went abroad straight away, and we started in Singapore and started distributing there, which is a great hub for Asia. In order to do that, we're obviously all based here. We had to collaborate. We had to set up systems, and you just mentioned a few of them. Inventory management's really important to us, finance, CRM, all those sorts of systems. We're not particularly experts in them. We see ourselves in our business, we're really good at creating brands and selling things and speaking to consumers. So the rest of the ecosystem we had to build around us, and that's what we set about doing.
Compared to the old business supply chain, linear supply chain, you're giving up a bit of control there. I mean, how do you approach, or would you advise people to approach that?
Yeah, I think Tony's just hit the nail on the head, actually. It's one of the biggest bits of advice I could give is when you're going into a partnership, a collaboration, it's about understanding what your strengths are, what your weaknesses are, what do you bring to the party, and what are the gaps, and therefore what are you trying to find in terms of creating that collaboration and that ecosystem. You for sure have to be in a position where you're prepared to give up something. I have found at times where ecosystems haven't worked, people sometimes aren't prepared to give up that ego. You know, they want to keep that control, and it can't work. So I think the key to success is where you understand what success looks like. What's the end game? What part do you each play in trying to get there? And being really, really clear around that.
So there's a sense of really having a pretty good understanding of your own business and your own business goals, I guess, from the outset.
Yeah, that's right.
Yeah. Karna, maybe just for you, how much of this is about technology? Because these things were possible and you could work this way in the past, but something's sort of changed. I mean, use the word disruption, but in the speed of the internet and these new cloud-based services, it's sort of a brave new world for this stuff.
Yeah, I think technology has certainly got a part to play, but I think there are a couple other factors that are driving some of the change to ecosystems. One of those is digital natives. So there are more digital natives now, so people are growing up digitally first. And that is connecting people to a customer experience that they then create an expectation. And so that becomes the standard. So in traditional old business, we'll get you your product when we're finished and it'll turn up. But today it's more consumer-driven and consumer-led. So digital natives definitely drive a part of that. But I think as technology continues, we've got one other part that's really, I think, to the fore, and it's around sustainability. Because with information, you're closer to your data, you're closer to that. People are more inherently attuned to what's going on in our environment as well. So I think technology, the digital natives and that sustainability is helping drive a faster acceleration to our information.
Sure. I mean, Tony, you were involved in the tech sector. Do you think it's a sort of a very future-focused now thing, this collaborative approach, or has it changed?
Well, I don't, to be honest, think I was very good at the tech, to be honest. So I went into FMCG. But I took some sensibilities I learned from tech and early tech. I'm sort of like the late 90s through early 2000s. And I think you mentioned it earlier. There was a little bit of protecting of what we were doing and secrecy around what we were doing and not wanting to collaborate. But also that sort of time on the early .coms, there was also these, new tools like Internet Messenger, for example, right? And so we had coders in Estonia and coders in Russia and different parts of the world that were building databases for us, but we never actually met these people, But so that was my first sort of like steps in that sort of collaborating environment that you talk about, and it's become second nature to us, to me and my team now. So we've taken a lot of learnings from the tech. After tech, I was in the creative industry, and we've taken a lot of those sorts of processes in the way that we actually approach the way we do things now. We set the path, we set the vision, and then we just create. And if things fall over or they fail, we fail quickly and we push it aside and move on and move on to the next thing. So, I've got endless examples of things that haven't worked for us, but they're fortunately outweighed by things that have worked for us. So that's just the way we approach it.
Yeah. The fear I think a lot of businesses would have is that you've got potentially, it's not like a formal partnership. You've got relationships that are based on trust or based on a mutual understanding. Did you have any thoughts on how to, make those work?
Absolutely. I mean, all of this only works if there's trust and the relationships are formed. So, I'd say to anybody who's starting out in this way, that start slowly and build on it. And I'd like to give an example of where it worked really well in the not-for-profit world. So I've just been 10 years CEO of Karna Luke Enterprises. As a not-for-profit and a small company, and for us, because we were a social enterprise, our trading, our income generation was the most important part of our survival. So we managed to basically get 7 organisations across the country to actually start collaborating, which suddenly meant that we were able to bid for contracts with Air New Zealand, with Foodstuffs, with Fonterra, companies that would never have looked at us on our own, but together we could actually do it. But we couldn't start there. We couldn't start straight away doing that because suddenly you're saying, I've got a really good business development person and I haven't. So we started slowly. We started years ago by actually just coming together as a collective voice for government, building on that trust, building on those relationships, and then suddenly you can take that next stage, which is real, true collaboration in the sense of the word. So I think if you take it slowly, unless you've got a really great relationship to start with, iterate on it and fail quickly if it's not going to work in terms of the relationship. So,
do you think there are sectors where this works better, or is it for some and not others, or is it really just sort of across the board now?
Well, I think what we're seeing at the moment is more the work that Michelle's talking about. People want to collaborate together, and I think if you go back to New Zealand's still a relatively small country, and our business dynamics are such that you get to a certain size, you have to find other markets to connect with. Now, you can either do that yourself, or you can use the balance sheet of somebody else or somebody else's assets to actually help you. And so I think in terms of industries, there are some that have been doing it for a while. So it's not like it's new, but the collaboration part in terms of the win-win, I think that's new.
Yeah.
And so multiple industries can collaborate together, and I think we're seeing more and more of that in terms of Tony's example as well.
Yeah, and cross-sector as well. I think that's where a lot of value can come. You can have a large corporate that collaborates with a small organisation for the mutual benefit of both. But 1 + 1 has to equal 3. It's got to be a win-win. Otherwise, the powers don't work. The power shift changes.
Yeah, I guess it's probably something to watch out for, isn't it? Because you may be having to forego, or it might feel like you're having to forego some sort of wins at a very short-term level if you're chasing that bigger goal.
And I think that's why it's really important to have that understanding of what success looks like, so you can keep that focus on that. And otherwise, it's very easy to go and put your company first because of that short-term view. So having that long-term view of what success looks like and understanding it and making sure that you're all on the same page is super important.
I think also what we're seeing is we're seeing people in traditional business models who would own everything or do it yourself. I need a warehousing, manufacturing plant in New Zealand. I need one in Australia because I've got to distribute. Geez, that's cost. I've got to pay people in New Zealand. I have to pay people in Australia tax. But actually, over the time, and Tony's a really good example, you can actually use the fundamentals of somebody else's business and use their freight logistics really well. They do it better than you do, and they'll do it better than you do all day, every day, because that's their competency. And you'll have your product turning up on time, on quality, and you'll be managing your cost base better. Now you know exactly what's happening in the market, and you're not having to overexpose your business to too many things as well.
Yeah,
I mean that's a great example, Liam. We don't own a bottling plant anywhere. We're sold in over 30 countries. We don't own any warehouses anywhere. We're very, very asset light. And we are really a sales and marketing organisation, and everything that we do is about selling.
and I guess you've got experience in both directions there as well, though, right? Because you've got to play with some of the biggest drinks companies in the world for events or for you know, I mean, and I don't want to steal your line, but you're a mixer company, so it's gin and tonic, and
that's great. Yeah, that is right. Yeah, we play nicely with everyone. It's in our interest to do so. But, you know, there's something one of you guys just said before, is that we're actually working with a very large multi-conglomerate drinks business at the moment, and they are using us really, we're collaborating, but they're really using us for their innovation lab at the moment. And so it's really good for us because it opens up huge distribution for us, which we don't have, and into new markets. But it's really good for them because companies their size historically aren't great at innovation. So we can innovate for them, get our brand into their channels. So it's a win-win. So that's just another great example of being nimble, being small, just being really focused on what we do and what we're really good at, and collaborating with other people.
Are there risks here that you think you need to consider?
I guess there could be reputational damage if you collaborate with the wrong organisation. So doing your upfront due diligence and making sure that you've got that really strong partnership and relationship, I suspect, is probably one of the most important fundamentals. I think understanding what you bring to the party and therefore what you're foregoing, being the expert on, I think that's really, really important as well. Because if you get that wrong, I've seen it unravel very, very quickly, where people think that they know better, think that they have the answer, where really you've partnered with another organisation because they're the ones that are the experts, the freight example.
Yeah, no, Michelle's point before about testing, trying, learning and growing is actually quite important. There are financial risks and benefits to anything that you do. And so in this model where you may be asset light, you do need to know that your partners who you're collaborating with are going to make sure that your product turns up in a way that's consumable, or your service is delivered. Otherwise, that starts to create a bit of financial risk for you. So you do have to manage that. as well, because it's not all beds and roses all the time. There are things that happen as well.
How are the banks with some of these more esoteric relationships and things? Because it's not all going to be on the balance sheet when you're talking to the bank manager.
Yeah, correct, absolutely. And so what we're doing as a bank is we're saying, well, there's the traditional business model and there's the new business model, and we need to get au fait with how customers are actually operating in that way, which means for us, we have to look at our credit policies, we have to look at how we're funding, and you'll see more and more businesses of the future using trade capital. You'll see people using invoice finance more rather than using fixed debt structures. In the US, some of the flip in terms of their debt versus the more working capital solutions, it's gone really quickly the other way. Everyone knows big Amazon, everyone knows what you can do online, but they've people like that are lending trade credit lines. So they're a platform-based company, but they're able to lend trade credit lines.
Yeah. Michelle, to pick up on that a little bit, but Karna's mentioned a bit just about where things might be going, and I just thought maybe to run past all of you, I guess, but where are we going in this space? Is the technology just speeding it up, making it easier? Is this just going to become the norm?
Yeah, I don't think this is a phase. I think back to the point that Karna made right at the beginning around us and the millennials in particular, holding us as businesses accountable for sustainability. They're going to be driving it. Technology makes it so much easier, even down to the simple tools around collaboration. You've got Microsoft Teams, let's say. I was just telling my colleague Rebecca earlier that 5 of us have just worked across a week intercompany on a piece of work that we could all do because technology allows us to do it in a really collaborative way, but it had to start with trust, clearly, and everyone had the role they were playing. So I think technology does play a part. I think there's another thing in terms of collaboration where we're starting to see collaboration with exact competitors, with immediate competitors. And I look at, with my Vodafone hat on now, just simple things like Spark and Vodafone coming together around the rollout of RBI, so the rural broadband scheme. That's about connecting some of our, most remote communities, such an important thing that we're doing, and how great that 2 big organisations can come together and actually make something like that happen. And it's that kind of collaboration which ultimately can raise the bar for everybody, because it means that if you're sharing data, you're sharing stats together, you can actually stop some of the disruption that's coming sideways that you might not be seeing coming otherwise.
So sort of to sum up, if I can ask you all for three things that you should have top of mind, 3 tips that you'd have to take advantage of this when you're making your decisions about collaborating, getting into it, and who to collaborate with. So just watching to see who's ready to go first. Don't want to put you on the spot. If you've got 2 great ones, I don't.
I think shared values is really important. We've all touched on it. I think you absolutely have to have shared values with whoever you're going into business with, and that could be around quality, honesty, integrity, whatever it is. I think understanding the end game is really important, and understanding the role that you play in this partnership, and vice versa with whoever you're partnering with.
Cool.
Yeah, I was going to say relationships are key for everything. We touched upon it earlier today, Liam. It's just that we spend a lot of our time nurturing our relationships, and I think testament to that is everyone that we've collaborated with since we started this business, we're still collaborating with. So those companies have grown with us. The other thing is I think is focus on what you're really good at, and I think that's really important. That's what we try and do, and the rest of it can be a little bit noise, and just keep really focused on what you're good at and where you're going. And I think thirdly, and I think it's where we're kind of at the moment, is continue to review what we're actually up to. I think if you look at us for bottling, we co-pack. What it's called is we contract our stuff out to be bottled around the world. It's getting more competitive, that space. And so just always keeping on top of and checking that we are actually getting the very best deal. And it's the same as logistics, right? Logistics is a very expensive game, and we do a lot of logistics in our business, but just keeping on top of those costs as well. And I think finally is really, we've got a lot of different systems, online systems, cloud-based apps and systems that we use within our business, is ensuring they can all kind of speak to each other the best they possibly can. And that's not easy. And that's I think that's an IT challenge. But that's kind of one where we're at the moment, is consciously making decisions what systems we're using and for collaboration, but making sure that they're not going to actually hinder us in the future.
Great.
And look, I'll start with a typical banky thing. You know, cost economics is understanding what your trade-off is. So on both sides, so you can work on the win-win piece. And I literally agree with everything that they've talked about. I think collaboration gives you a really good thing to look out for, and Tony touched on it. There are other opportunities that come through collaboration. So whilst focus on what you're good at, don't forget to look for the new opportunities and the new blossoms that start coming for that. You know, people can become test beds, and New Zealand's well known for that. They start something that grow offshore, and then they can become a test bed for a global giant who can start to use them because we're faster and, you know, just a lot less red tape to get through stuff. So I think that's important. Look for the opportunities in that as well.